Hello everyone, this is Severance Deep Dive Episode 3. Today we are covering Season 2, Episodes 1 through 5. If you've been watching these in a row, you know the drill by now, let's just jump right into it. Also, new trigger warning for SA, if you watch this season not thinking too hard, you're probably confused, but I'll get into it and give you another warning in Episode 4. Episode 1 starts with the muffled screaming of last season's climax as we cut to Mark waking up after the incident. In the elevator, we can already see the director wanted this season's camera work to be more surrealist. It circles around Mark quickly still in the elevator looking around distressed following the opposite of his eyeline. Then follows as he runs around the halls disoriented, subtly telling the audience this must be a new floor, since he can't find his way around the maze of hallways he knew like the back of his hand Season 1. Great decision by the writers or whoever to bring up the need for a new floor. So much of last season hinged on them mapping the floor, so obviously the evil masterminds behind Lumen would negate that. The music keeps ramping up until he finds Wellness, or at least where Wellness used to be. The door concreted over with Milchek gazing at him from afar. We find the office filled with 3 new people who are specifically designed not to build any form of camaraderie with Mark. A middle-aged man who only speaks Italian and refuses to engage with Mark. A old man who actively hates Mark from the get-go because his name is also Mark, who also prefers Italian. And a woman whose sole goal in life is to learn about the outside. And when Mark's answers don't satisfy her, she hates him the most, which, at every opportunity, prevents his can't-do-it-alone attitude. Milchek introduces himself as the new floor manager, peppering in that it's been 5 months since he was last conscious. We meet Miss Huang, a little girl who's taking over his position as handler, and by little girl I mean she's legitimately 12 max, which, again, so smart, chef's kiss to the writers. But for some reason Mark is on his own now. He must have some extreme importance to Lumen that they not only let him back, but planned a whole floor to deter any escape. Like Petey and Helly taught us, he's always had a rebellious spirit. He's always wanted to escape, he just gets beat down easily and needs a motivator. This selection of co-workers single-handedly killed any hope of allyship, let alone motivation, and also has a reformatted layout. The handler being a little girl is also a deterrent. Milchek essentially left open the door for violence being a grown man, both to inflict and do upon, which in situations like this can improve our character's chances. Like we see with Dylan biting him in Season 1, it was essential to our escape. And worse comes to worse, you could knock him out. But hopefully you watching and definitely Mark can't bring himself to hurt a child. They even hang an all-access card around her neck because they know Mark won't take it from her. They bring attention to it like it's even higher than Milchek's was last season. After Milchek introduces him, he goes on about how reformed they are as a company and pinned it all on Miss Covell, not even trying to be skillful in ignoring Mark's questions. Until he asks where his team is. Where Milchek responds that all of their Audis refuse to come back, but his practically begged to come back. Back in the MDR department, they are doing a welcome exercise, where all of his co-workers explain how they were retired or about to, which lends to the theory that Lumen curated this team so much they needed to hire old employees. Mark's share is just a forced, "I'm glad I made 4 new friends today." When Miss Huang got so mad he included her in the 4 that she yelled she is his superior, adding to the weird dissonance that this child is actually his superior. We then see in what is supposed to be the replayed elevator switch scene we've seen practically every episode, that he now switches twice, implying this floor is much further down. He plants a note lamenting Milchek and other Mark's coat, an obvious ploy to get caught as the perpetrator, to get Milchek's attention to make him go to the kitchenette so he can make a run for Milchek's office. He finds the magical old-timey phone we've called this all-knowing board with before to beg for his team back, when we then see Milchek had the cord unplugged anyway. So he gets escorted to the elevator where he and the audience thinks he's just getting decommissioned, if you will. But instead, he wakes up to a painting of Kira as a king-like figure pardoning his subjects. Turns out the phone thing worked, not like we know anyway due to their characteristic dead silence. Dylan and Irving come out immediately after Mark, and Irv runs off visibly upset. He locks himself in the closet as Helly practically jumps out of the elevator, keep that in mind, when Miss Huang escorts them to the media room. Milchek makes sure to say this video will be shown to every innie, as we see it as a claymation retelling of the rebellion. It's classic manipulation showing them as evil, and a drama of inspiration and love showing Mark and Helly kissing, which, as I've probably said before, in Season 1, the main love story is Irving and Bert. Helly and Mark fans are probably grabbing their keyboards very aggressively right now, especially due to later in the season, which I'll get to. but it is very clear they come off like a actually good representation of male and female friendship, just to surprise the audience with that last kiss. There was practically no build-up. Meanwhile, Bert and Irving had tons of scenes with very clear romantic intent in front of all of the cameras. All to say, the only love story being shown in this video being Helly and Mark is a very clear hint to a more explored theme this season, which is Lumen feigning progressiveness while still being weirdly traditional, like a lot of big companies nowadays. Back to the video, it's just Lumen praising themselves for forgiving our team, which they practically deem as monsters, and how the only problem they must have had was there wasn't enough snacks and incentives, so they added more. Which, again, so smart, the world building, writing, everything, moi. And Milchick says that the whole floor is now unrecorded, no cameras, no microphones, so they don't have to hide in closets anymore, which I think is a false sense of security, but I don't remember if we get proven one way or the other. They regroup and fully recap what they saw on the outside, besides Helly, who lies and says she woke up in a boring apartment with sweatpants on, and the only person she saw was a gardener. Which, if you'll remember when they escaped, it was dark outside, which Irving catches and asks what gardener gardens at night, and she brushes him off, but that's a very valid point, Irving. Even if we didn't see what she saw, that's a obvious lie. But I guess everyone else is lacking gardener knowledge lets it go. As they leave, Mark talks to Helly about the whole dead wife / art therapist situation, and Helly just flips out on him, off-puttingly so, about how it's not his wife and how completely different outies and innies are, which makes sense. Obviously she wants to distance herself from her outie, but Mark doesn't know that, so he's taken aback to say the least. During all of this chaos and reorientation, I also forgot to mention how Milchick gave them the option to permanently leave at the end of the day if they really wanted to. I guess to keep in Mark's good graces while still limiting his escape chances. His outie and innie obviously want to uncover the secret, but his coworkers might take him up on it. Irv is heartbroken to the point permanent non-existence doesn't sound too bad. But as Dylan's comforting him and he's about to leave, he pulls him close and says there's a black hallway with an arrow pointing down that was in all of the paintings covering his outie's room. Weirdly cut to Milchick in Miss Cobell's chair, staring angrily at the computer because it still says, "Welcome, Miss Cobell," yelling at someone on the phone, which could be hinting many things and is never solved due to later reasons, but a easy theory to conclude is Miss Cobell's demotion and his promotion weren't shouted too high up the ranks for whatever reason. When Dylan then comes in and he tells him his wife's name, along with how if he keeps it a secret from the others, he will get visitations. I assume confirming he took the deal for family information from last season, or as his carrot to keep him under control, which later in the season we see a lot of the characters get. I assume Lumen's new finger traps weren't good enough incentive for this crew. Boom, everyone is staying, end of episode 1. Episode 2 is solely about the Outies' experience immediately after the events of last season. And like last season's finale, I can confidently bottle each character's story instead of including the cuts. So, starting with Mark, we see him at the sister's party, change back whilst the sister is shaking him, asking him what her name is. He jokes, but you can tell how weirded out he is. After the party, Milchick visits with a basket and is simply trying to see how much Mark knows, which turns out to be nothing since he's even hiding the wife thing. Milchick even explains the OTC situation to him and pins it all on Miss Cobell, which if you forget from last season, Outie Mark hates Miss Cobell so much he has every reason to believe this. He specifically says she was infatuated with him and trying to pursue him, basically lying and begging him to come back to work. Since Mark is still on the "this is too weird, I'm probably not going back to work" train, Mark is at a diner with his sister when she keeps kind of pushing him about the whole "Innie said your wife's alive" thing, which he keeps denying it. She keeps asking him to at least look into it because she cared about her too, and he takes this to imply he cared less about his wife than her. So he just blows up. He brings up how he identified the body, which, wow, I got chills from that lore dump. His refusal to connect the common sense pieces of Innie holding wife's photograph and says she's alive just felt stupid and off-putting. But if you saw your loved one's body, of course you'd be a little hard-pressed to believe it and throw a fit. And how they, 1, find a body, and 2, make it identifiable to Mark. You could say they destroyed the face, and that might have worked on a sister-in-law, but you know Mark saw her undressed and probably looked for a birthmark or what have you. Milchek then shows up at his house with a 20% raise and slyly mentions his wife, so he accepts. He sees Miss Cobell leaving her house, he confronts her, and she makes fun of him for going back. He asks about Gemma, and she breathes heavily, communicating she can't say it, but obviously something is wrong. In Helly's story, she is just staring a hole in the bathroom mirror about to cry when her father, the cure, comes in and silently gets 2 inches from her face. He calls her a fetid moppet, which obviously I had to look up expecting it to be a Latin insult or what have you. But the AI overview, which I never read, is outright like, you mean what they said in Severance? Apparently, it has never been used besides this one instance, which looking at the meaning makes sense. Fetid being a extremely offensive or foul smell, and moppet meaning a old affectionate term for a child. The Egans or Cures, what have you, are very purity and cleanliness focused. If I hadn't said it before, it's just one of the aggressive themes we see with Helena specifically. So calling her foul practically would be the worst term to use in this instance. And then cutting it with something akin to My Sweet Baby or something, very clear abuse tactics on display in one sentence. Saying something that destroys your core than saying the sun shines out of you. And then he just walks away. That's how quote-unquote in line he knows he has Helena. He knows that telling off can be done in 2 words. Cut to a business meeting she's having with Miss Cobell, where Milchek is definitely treating her like the CEO's daughter. Which, geez, I wish we followed Milchek more. Imagine your boss's boss works under you day in, day out, and randomly shows up outside of the office, but still in an office, and you have to treat her then like God. Basically, Helena is taking care of the situation Helly created. She took care of everyone that was at the party and destroyed any video trace, and is now speaking with Miss Cobell to sort of pay her back for informing them of what was going on. She wants an apology, and in a lesson in corporate speak, Helena says, "I apologize. My father apologizes. The board apologizes." She even offers Cobell a shut up, don't sue us, and take a paycheck job, not her previous role. So Miss Cobell refuses. Helena, alone in the same room, very visibly swallows her pride and makes a apology video, I guess for anyone who is still able to see it. She obviously can't say that the innies can just escape and be awakened in public, so she says she was very intoxicated and it mixed with her rash medicine, which made her go crazy. Which is funny to think about. She's like, no guys, I wasn't just 2 drinks drunk, I was 2 drinks and rash medicine drunk. After the video, she watches security footage of Helly and Mark falling in love and kissing, and the look that crosses her face here is debated, and I'm even confused due to later contradictions, so I'll give you both options. First watch through, I thought she was very obviously horrified. That's equivalent to being kissed in your sleep to her. I thought it was opening a much-needed discussion of consent in this case scenario, like I raised last season, but her being horrified here would be the show confirming it. However, some shippers, and due to scenes later, contextualize the scene as her being jealous of her innie being deserving of love and not her. But I'll leave that discussion for later. Back in the office, they tell Helena Mark needs her to finish his special project Cold Harbor, and to me, she looks scared to death, but I know that's not the case, so whatever. Dylan, of course not leaving previously, just walks out of the Lumen building in the middle of the night. Milchek visits him and fires him for a supposed fight with Irving, and you can see how utterly distressed he is. Cut to Dylan looking for jobs because we see he has a whole family to support, and his wife is taking night shifts, etc. The interview is going great until he gets out of Dylan that he's severed, and he does not like that one bit. Playing into the being severed as a political thing in this world plot nicely. Outie Dylan comes off sort of unlikable. His wife is super nice, and he's just mean towards her. And that's literally the end of his story this episode. We see Irv back at the house get fired for the quote-unquote fight, begging Milchek not to. Cut to him at a payphone in the dark, and all we catch is, "I know you're not picking up, my innie got the message," right before we see Bert in his car following him. Episode 3, we get a quick flash that Miss Cobell is now homeless. Stash that in your brain. When we see Outie Mark running into work and timing it, obviously curating some escape or information snuggling plan. When Innie Mark wakes up, he immediately makes missing posters for Miss Casey. Irving, too scared to find this floor's O&D, paints the mysterious hallway, asking Dylan to help him search for it. but he refuses, the carrot comically working with Miss Wong taking him to his first visitation. Cut to Milchek talking to the board vessel where she congratulates him for the promotion and gives him a gift to make him feel more seen by Kier. To preface, all of the Kiers or CEOs so far have been white men, maybe one or two women. We've been shown this a lot, which is just lending to their somewhat bigoted views. But his gift here was the stereotypical Kier going through a life cycle. They basically just made Kier a person of color, and it's obviously not a good thing. Milchek is very upset by it. Milchek, who has been unnervingly emotionless up to this point, yells, "Oh my!" with the same cadence as "Good heavens!" In a completely different episode, he runs into the board vessel of a woman, who also happens to be a person of color, and through his filter of wordiness and not being able to cross the anti-lumen line, he asks her how she felt about her quote-unquote gift. And she brushes him off through words, but through body language and hesitance, it's clear she felt uncomfortable about it too. Back in Ellie and Mark world, they are practically running for the goat people, which, by the way, as a Severance expert, this is very obviously a new floor, right? There's a concreted wellness, as you will soon see, a goat area, a rumored O&D, and obviously our MDR. But it's on a different grid/format. But our characters have 100% faith that all of the departments are not only there, but that they can find them quite easily. That's the only part I'm confused about in the show, which is very much made to confuse you. In the first season, they were very obviously lost and stumbled upon the goats. Here, they are running for it like a target. Was Mark not extremely disoriented at the very start of the season? And changed twice in the elevator? But again, the departments are all different. This goat sanctuary, you have to crawl through a doggy tunnel to get to a huge white room with a slightly smaller hill in the middle. And a metric ton of people. Well, I exaggerated, there was 20 or so, but compared to the one guy before, this has the same effect of finding those 100 people in O&D last season. The woman who seems the most normal, the rest being in goat costumes, quietly says, "Are you going to kill me?" Hallie and Mark ask about Miss Casey just for them to all menacingly say, "You should have left." On the other hand, we finally see Dylan's wife visitation and he's being walked through the hallways. He asks what we've all been asking. "Is it rude to keep asking you why you're a kid?" to Miss Wong. In the actual room, there's tons of weird photos on the wall, and his wife is such a sweet woman. She shows him pictures of the kids and practically begs him to stay. Apparently his Audi self wasn't able to get any jobs, and his reasoning for severing was a confidence and economic one, which is the most down-to-earth, so to speak, of our main cast, and would probably be the everyman reasoning. But here's a good place to put a reminder or more clear explanation of why they all did it. Mark did it to escape his wife's death. Hallie did it to appease her father and contribute to the company, and Irving did it because he has a very obvious anti-lumen operation to be the inside man on, something related to the military and secretive calls, and his possible dementia. Speaking of Irving Innie, he finally was able to go to O&D, and Bert's second-in-command is running it now, which begs the question, is this the same O&D? What is going on? She reminisces how Bert used to spend 2 hours checking his hair before he went to see Irv, which was such a cute detail. And he asks her where the hallway he painted might be. Luckily, she's the expert because it's in the O&D shipping hallway. Back with Mark and Hallie, since they haven't left yet, we tackled the stereotypes you'll remember from season 1 that the departments have about one another, and show them our bellies. I kid you not. Which results in them basically saying they won't help, but they won't hinder our cert. Miss Cobell in the parking lot threatens Hallie, outie Hallie, that she will call the board if she doesn't get her job back when Helena. For once I have differing Audi and Indy names and I'm not using it for some reason. Helena decimates her and just immediately calls the board. So Miss Cobell just walks off, which, yeah, me too, girl. That's like threatening to hurt somebody and they punch themselves in the face. You can't mess with that level of balls. On Mark's Audi adventures, we see him under the covers trying to burn who is alive into his eyes. Must have been the plot he was timing earlier. He actually re-meets the reintegration lady here, and she says, "That's stupid, you have to be reintegrated." And he's like, "No, I don't wanna." And she's like, "Your wife's alive, last time I was there I saw her." And he's like, "Yes, of course, I'll do anything you want." Stated more eloquently, of course. And that's the end of episode 3. Episode 4 starts with being a bottle episode and yet the most influential to the plot yet. Which is completely contradictory, I know. There's so much plot here, it should have been a finale, and yet at the beginning of the episode, the whole crew wakes up in the Arctic. They all have different spawn points, Mark being on the mountain they need to be on, Dylan being on the mountain opposite, Helly halfway up, and Irving, our oldest member, at the bottom in the middle of a goddamn frozen lake. Once they all yell at Irving to get his ass up there, they find a TV with Milchek basically saying this is a Lumen field trip to find out about the original Kier's brother, specifically calling it the OTC. Helly is extremely proud while everyone else is confused, foreshadowing if I ever saw it. They follow clones of themselves pointing the way, until in a cave they find the last book out of the books of principles we've seen floating about. Here's the gist right now, because it's disjointedly read through the whole episode and will not stop using words I had to look up. During boyhood, Kier had a twin who wanted to live in the woods and be poor, basically. One day, he caught his brother, how do I say this on YouTube? Oh, sorry. I'll use the term he did. Spilling his lineage on the leaves. And he kills his brother. And then Milchek, I'll get into it, reads the phrase, and now he's no one's brother, only Chaos's WHRE. It's just a crazy line. While they were reading and walking, Irv confides in Mark Helly is being weird, and he absolutely brushes him off. They see a rotting seal along the path, and Irving freaks out even further. Like I've previously argued, I think his actual mental health issues due to his outie getting visions, losing time, and experiencing random freakouts like this. But to be fair, it's valid. He's scared they are going to have to eat it. Before Milchek shows up and calls him silly, he brings them to a camp, and specifically the fire, to read the story. At the chaos line, Mark and Helly just start hysterically laughing. So Milchek makes Miss Huang destroy their marshmallows for being disrespectful. When they leave, however, Irving brings up how weird Helly's being again in front of the whole group, and she says, "It's okay, guys. We all know Irving is hurting because he can never see Bert again, and he's really lonely." All the characters, and us as the audience, make a face like that was way too far, because it was, and Irving runs into the woods over it. Okay, now I must spoil the biggest plot twist of season 2. 2 minutes before it naturally would have happened in the script. Ever since Helly came back this season, she's been Helena. It goes all the way back to when she jumped out of the elevator because she thought that's what switching was. The gardener story, the being cruel. There was 50 hints. This was amazingly done. However, here is the official second essay warning. After this argument, the crew gets ready to sleep in their tents, and Helena enters Mark's tent, apologizes for being mean to Irving, and sleeps with him. Hopefully I do not have to explain that assault is not just aggressive, not taking no for an answer. It is also deception and sleeping with someone under a false identity. Consent does not really exist in Severance to begin with, like I tried to argue back in season 1 when everyone was just kissing. But especially with more, for women, you can tell something happened. And that is such a horror element, the violation they must feel. For the non-involved innie or outie, it was basically while they were unconscious. So not only is Helly unconscious here, but more bad, Mark fully believes she is Helly instead of Helena. This is cut and clear intentional assault by Helena. This is where, though, what I think was intended jealousy towards Helly because she wanted Mark, and the show somewhat brushes past it. If you are someone who is still confused on the sci-fi elements, the IRL equivalent would be if your partner had a twin who could look and act exactly like her, and seduced you and slept with you without knowing a thing. After this horrific event, we find Irv has been sleeping in the cold, hallucinating all night, and Helena finds him and wakes him up, and he just goes off on her, specifically saying, "What you said to me last night, it was cruel." And Helly was never cruel, so he grabs her and forces her next to the ice-cold water. He screams for Milchek, and the second he gets there, he starts drowning her until he turns her back. Eventually, Helena yells at Milchek by his real name to just effing do it, which he does, and Irv brings Helly close, pleading with her how sorry he is. Milchek tells him to get away from her, so he hands her to Mark, when he then makes Irving walk into the woods and offs him. Literally like he turns him off, a more permanent version than the retirements because he says he will erase any mention he was ever there, which I feared would include the main cast memories, but luckily that was not the case. He just can never come back. The Irving we knew is dead, and that is the end of episode 4. And the way that he waited until Milchek was there, until he started, and then, like, the second he knew it was Helly, he was about to cry. It was so sad. Like, he really did his best not to hurt Helly. I was shell-shocked when the Helly/Elena twist came during the drowning scene, which was somewhat perfect timing because the sleep together scene should have made you happy. This couple that developed more during the season was taking the next step. This season you're supposed to be a hardcore Helly and Mark fan, and then they just ripped that development away, and now on rewatch you're too disgusted to even watch it. I just can't believe there's still Helena x Mark shippers out there. And again, first watch you're supposed to cheer it on, so you may not give it a second thought post-drowning scene, but Helena is just a despicable character, and I'm glad they didn't make her cartoonishly evil like the father. When you dehumanize villains, that's all they become. You have a dissonance that a vampire can't actually bite you. You can see she's probably never been loved, and there's a severe loneliness to her character, along with the abuse. She's not a demon, she's a normal woman who assaulted Mark and deserves jail. Episode 5 starts with someone in a lab coat delivering surgical tools to the hallway Irving kept referring to. Outie Mark is swallowing a fistful of pills and then a pill bottle worth of what looks like a fungus shot. It definitely has something to do with the fact that Reintegration Girl is living with him. He is fully on board with reintegration now, but she won't let him go further yet. Helena returns to work, and everyone is corporate worried about her, only taking the weekend off. The other people at her level confirm that most of the stuff that has been happening as of late, and especially this incident, are being kept from her father, implying he would punish her for being almost drowned. They discuss that Cold Harbor, Mark's file, is at 81% completion, like it's a company-wide huge project. She is very clearly scared to death to go back in as Helly. I mean, she's a horrifically terrible person. I do not have sympathy for her, but from her perspective, this is the second attempt at her life. Milchek sets, finally, real Helly down, and in a very roundabout way informs her Irving is dead and Helena was in her place for a bit. She's obviously very upset that Helena could take her body from her like this. They have been openly worried about the Outies having final say on if they'll ever die, but they never imagined the whole inside spy probability. Everyone is mad at Helly this episode because they can't trust her anymore, which is kind of illogical. I mean, it wasn't her fault at all, but what can you expect, I guess. Dylan begs for a funeral, and Milchek surprisingly agrees. As he's setting up, he tells Miss Huang about how it's reserved for innies who physically die on the floor, which, oh my god, that happens. I know logically it'd have to, people have heart attacks, etc., but they bring up any chance they get that you don't have to worry about things like death here. So if someone on an MDR team, for example, had a heart attack, would everyone else get fired to avoid them talking to other departments? And I'm sure they'd be too freaked out to be optimal workers. But Miss Huang says, you shouldn't give them a funeral. It makes them feel like people. Miss Huang turning the subtext to just plain text, geez. And Milchek, with the most disdain he can muster, says something along the lines of, did I ask? At the funeral, Milchek gives them 9 seconds to think about Irving before making them give a eulogy. Dylan goes first, and Mark and Helly get mad at him for not caring. To be fair, he was the closest to Irving, didn't give it much thought, but again, they had 9 seconds, and that was too far. Dylan throws a whole fit and outs to the actual Helly that Mark's wife is Miss Casey. Mark runs out, and Helly follows him, asking what they're going to do about it. Annie angrily says there's nothing to do because they're always smarter and always ahead of them, and there's really no them anymore because no one trusts Helly now. Milchek goes in for his performance review, where one of the guys at Helena's level tells him this can take anywhere from 2 to 6 hours and gave him a menu for lunch. Their biggest gripe they kept emphasizing was that his paperclip system made it impossible to read his papers because they were back to front. Again, just hilarious and deeply upsetting commentaries on Lumen Corporate. They even say he can't defend any of the accusations until after lunch. He gets a folder at the end of the day with all of his misdeeds, including a whole page on paperclip usage. And Milchek, as I've stated before, is somewhat eccentric in his speech. He uses complex words for very simple sentences and concepts, and he got absolutely reamed out for it here. While Dylan was left alone in the funeral/media room, he ran over to the painting on the wall and reached behind it to find a piece of paper Irving painted the hallway on. Back in the actual MDR office, a defeated Mark starts hallucinating his desk photo phasing in and out of existence, a sign that the reintegration girl has started reintegrating him. The first sign we saw was during last episode's Helena, where he fully saw Miss Casey/Gemma instead of Helena, but obviously I had bigger fish to fry with that scene. Mark heads for the elevator and Milchek stops him, telling him he's leaving 6 minutes early, and gets real intimidatingly close to ask what he thought about the funeral. Mark, I will quote this word for word because he must have lost it, says, "I can't wait to read Miss Huang's article in that newspaper you showed me. What was it again? The Bullshit Gazette?" Mark's really towing the line, even saying, "Praise Kier," like he won, before trying to walk off. And Milchek gets even closer, not letting that slide, to say, "Did you tell her that you fucked her outie on the OTC?" And throws in that she's next in line to the Egan throne. Which, oh my god, I'm risking YouTube being mad at me to show you how out of character mad he made Milchek. And see what I mean? Obviously, Milchek is not a character we're supposed to morally follow, but even Helly, to an extent, are treating this like cheating, and something he should hide and be ashamed of, instead of very clear assault. And even more heinous, I forgot to mention, they kind of fall into kissing, etc., like their bodies know what to do, but with their very limited and in and out knowledge of the world, I don't think they know what consent is to an extent. So I can understand Mark blaming himself and not knowing, or of course Helly, but Helena and Milchek definitely know what happened. They are grown outie adults, and they are perpetuating and covering up her crime. We need to move on because this is making me angry. Remember last season, Mark's brother-in-law's book was being pursued by Lumen to make an any version? Basically, they realized his obvious prose was a great manipulation tactic and wanted it to work for them. Well, his wife is now angry at him for making the opposite of his original book. Before, he was a bad writer with good intent, now he's just a bad writer. Irving's outie throws away all of the hallway paintings, his insider mission being a bust. We see him at the same payphone saying, "They fired me. I think they knew what my innie was up to." He finally decides to confront Bert following him, and Bert just says, "I got this thing when someone shows up to my doorstep screaming my name. I want to know why." Called it a quirk. Probably my first laugh of the season. And they make dinner plans. Back with outie Mark, reintegration woman is looking through a box of his wife's things when he asks, "Are they hurting her?" I gotta say, great acting that felt like it was hurting him. She responds, "I don't know." Then, as he starts walking away, we can hear clear as day, "You're outie." In Miss Casey/Gemma's voice, he whips around asking if she said something. She says no, so he just keeps walking. "You're outie. Can parallel park in 20 seconds. Then he visually hallucinates switching from the break room hallway and his house's hallway. When he gets to the end, it stagnates on a Lumen one and Miss Casey. As the tears roll down his face, the credits roll. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I worked really hard on it. And if you did, please give it a like, comment, subscribe, whatever you want to do, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!